I'm Blair Taylor. I'm the CEO of Tennesseans for Quality Early Education, and pleased to be here with y'all this morning. If you wouldn't mind, everybody just take a minute and make sure you are muted. You've got yourself on mute because we got about 20 people on the call. And there we go. Thank you for that. We are, I am joined by my fabulous colleagues at the UT Grow Your Own Center, Erin Crisp, who's the Executive Director, and Kate Hall, the Associate Director, and they're going to be co-presenting this information with me this morning, and of course are our crucial partner in this grant opportunity. The topic here is, as all of you all know, and I've communicated with all of you all by email, we are going to be talking today about this UT Grow Your Own and Tennesseans for Quality Early Education partnership that really has been building over the past year. And we have identified, and the reason for this call and why we're assembled today is because there is a US Department of Labor grant opportunity for apprenticeships. And particularly, we see a real opportunity for the early educator pipeline. Growing the early educator pipeline through this grant opportunity. And we know many of you are very interested in doing that and are already doing some of that work in your own spheres. It's the ABA2 grant, and Erin and Kate are going to speak about that in some more detail as we dive into this session today. We're going to then talk a little bit about sort of the model for apprenticeship partnerships, really the framework, and then some considerations for models. Many of you, which you all will be very familiar with in your own right. And then we're going to talk about some next steps. So the first thing I'm going to do, though, is just a quick introduction of Tennesseans for Quality Early Education, our Bright Start partnership. And then I'm going to kick it over to Erin and Kate for some introduction to the UT Grow Your Own Center, which some of you all I know have some familiarity with. Others of you all are not as familiar. So very quickly, Tennesseans for Quality Early Education, most of you all know this who are on this call, but we're a statewide nonprofit organization, and we are advancing policies and practices to close opportunity and achievement gaps for Tennessee children birth through third grade. And this little cycle here just represents our approach to the whole child, to supporting the whole child through both policy and, make sure I'm letting somebody in here who's joining us. And we are today focusing on this this first piece of the whole of what we see as supporting the whole child, which is high quality birth through age 8 or birth through third grade learning environments, and in particular the early educator workforce. That's the linchpin to success with that. While we're here, our North Star is really that third grade reading and math proficiency. That is so much of a sort of jumping off point or a springboard for everything. Following that, this is just simply we do a lot of work in.
Can you what?
Oh, Jonathan, I think you or somebody may be off mute. This is a reflection of a depiction of last year's TCAP scores for third grade, and the data is disaggregated. We think that's very important so that we can understand where there are opportunity gaps among different groups of our children, and which really becomes an equity issue. And it helps us, as we look at disaggregated data, it helps us to understand where we need to weigh in more, deploy more resources, and give greater attention to ensuring that we can close those opportunity gaps and ultimately achievement gaps. But we know across the board, Tennessee is roughly 60% of our third graders are below grade level in ELA. And we have a comparable slide for math, but I'm not going to go into that. It tells about the same story. This is, everyone on this call probably knows this, but again, it's part of that was our North Star, that third grade reading and math. This is part of, why it makes sense. This is the famous Heckman curve from the Nobel Prize winning economist James Heckman, who has told us about the economics of human potential and the actual ROI, the value investing earlier in the sort of the life cycle of a child. The more we invest in early learning programs, the greater return on investment. And this last piece of what I want to just ground everybody in today is we, again, work on the policy, state policy side, as well as on the practice side, most of you all here on this call today are part of our Bright Start Tennessee network, and you're affiliated or engaged with in part a local Bright Start partner of ours. And we are in 8 different communities across the state. There's a backbone organization for each one of our Bright Start partnerships. And all of you all in these partnerships have been engaged over recently in developing early care and education plans for your communities, and are in the process of implementing those and have multiple partners and stakeholders. And all of you have shared with Jonathan Schoonover, who's my colleague on this call and who leads the Bright Start Tennessee Network. All of you all have shared with him the importance of the early educator network, the pipeline, the importance of growing that, the shortage that is causing so many problems in the childcare side of things, as well as the pre-K to 3rd grade side of things in elementary school. And so that has brought us to really lending a lot of effort and focus to what do we do? How can we work across our state, across our partnerships, identify new resources and strategies and models to really grow the early educator pipeline? And so this came out of a summit that we did last fall in September. We kind of pulled a bunch of different resources from different thought leaders across the state and also in state to develop and depict an early educator career lattice. And what this really shows is on the left side, just the types of multiple types of credentials and degrees that are available and accessible to available, though not always as accessible, to prospective early educators. And on the right side, the different types of careers that might be available and not necessarily accessible for prospective early educators who want to move through this network. And I do want to say about this, we view our scope of work and our Bright Start network as birth through 3rd grade. And we recognize that the early educator pipeline there's sort of childcare, private childcare, which is sort of exclusive to the pre-school period. And then there are LEAs, of course, who are doing the pre-K to 3rd work. We do know that there are challenges, huge challenges in compensation in the childcare side of things, the private childcare side of things, and even in the pre-K to 3rd side of things. But I do want to point out that we do not necessarily view this career lattice as linear. In other words, we are not suggesting that somebody in high school may be eligible to work as they get their CDA in a childcare provider, but what we're really trying to move them towards is a 2nd or 3rd grade teacher. We don't see it that way. We really see the valuing and the honoring and the supporting of early educators wherever they are, whatever steps they may want to take in their careers, and wherever but they may want to land. We don't view one part of that career lattice as more important or better or what we're aspiring to more so than the others. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron Crisp. And Aaron, if Jonathan Schoonover, my colleague, were hosting this, he would know how to spotlight you, but I haven't learned that technology in Zoom yet. So we'll all have to look to see. You'll just have to like raise your hand or jump up and down or something so people know where your square is.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Blair, for that introduction and introductory information. Hello, all. It's great to meet you. And I look forward to connecting with so many new faces and organizations across the state. My name is Erin Crisp. I serve as the Executive Director of the Tennessee Grow Your Own Center. I'm joined by my colleague, Associate Director Kate Hall, and she's going to actually kick us off, and then I will pick back up with some more information about who we are and what we do in the next few slides. So Kate, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Erin. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Hall, Associate Director of the Tennessee Grow Your Own Center. I'm really excited about this conversation today. Just to give you a little background, if you're not familiar with the Tennessee Grow Your Own Center, in January of 2022, Tennessee was the first state in the nation to have a registered apprenticeship program for teachers. And this was put through the hands of the Tennessee Department of Education to be scaled across the state. It is a partnership between the Tennessee Department of Ed, the University of Tennessee system, and our 11 partnering educator preparation programs, our colleges and universities, as well as around 73 school districts that we have as partners. But exciting news that that number continues to grow every month as more districts come on board, because the goal of all of us working together is really to strengthen the educator pipeline in Tennessee. We're really excited after our first full year of this registered apprenticeship program that the state of Tennessee has more registered apprentices for teachers than any other state in the country. And 30% of teacher apprentices are actually in the state of Tennessee. So in this registered apprenticeship program, there are three kind of players. There has to be an employer. And so in our case, the school districts, the LEAs are the employers. And to be a registered apprentice, you have to be employed with a partnering school district. The Department of Education is the sponsor. And so they're able to provide teachers the ability to become licensed at no cost if they are a registered apprentice. And then our education providers are our RTI providers, related technical instruction. And that's where they're able to tap into getting that bachelor's degree completion or a post-bac through licensure only in a one-year program. So we're excited to partner with Blair at TQEE to establish a new part of this pipeline into the early educator space. I'm really thinking about that birth through third grade through a registered apprenticeship for early childhood. So Erin, I'll turn it back over to you.
Kate. So Kate mentioned the breadth of our apprentices. We have about 600 apprentices or so in the pipeline at some point, and a variety of licensure areas. Some of those licensure areas available for teachers are that pre-K third licensure, but in a very limited scope. And so we learned early on that if part of the work of the Tennessee Grow Your Own Center is to expand educators who are prepared to work with early childhood, we're going to need some specific resourcing and incentives and focus and action planning on that early childhood space, because right now among our providers, we just don't have a lot of early childhood licensure pathways available. So that was part of why we are very interested in being a part of this work. Blair, you can go to the next slide. So the US Department of Labor issued a FOA, a grant proposal opportunity, a couple of months ago, the Apprenticeship Building America Grant Round 2. We read through the grant and really felt like this early childhood work was well positioned to be funded as a part of this grant. So we are proposing a Category 2 grant. The purpose of the grant from Department of Labor is to strengthen registered teacher apprenticeship systems in states through these three specific areas, and really all three of these align so well to early childhood care. Public-private partnerships. So DOL really wants to see scaling and acceleration of public-private partnerships, which is, you know, these partnerships that you all are already working within are great demonstrations of that. Through a range of industries, and they call out specifically in the grant educators and childcare as areas that they would like to fund with this grant opportunity. So another great reason for us to apply. And then the opportunity to translate training into good jobs. And they like seeing those progressions like Blair showed earlier with the lattice. Not that every single person who enters is going to walk up each of those steps into, you know, the goal is not to get everyone to a master's degree, but the goal is to be able to provide entry points for folks and training and development opportunities for anyone who wants them at any point in their career to continue to grow into roles that are of value to them and to our communities. So what is the timing? The grant is due April 15th. So we have a pretty short period of time. So when we get to the next tasks to be done, that's part of the reason for these kind of short-term turnaround times. Our geographic scope for the grant. So proposals can be in scope. You can choose a district, a region, a state, a national scope. Our scope for the grant is going to be the state of Tennessee. And I should mention, just to underscore something Kate said earlier, that even though the Tennessee Grow Your Own Center is, we were established through a partnership between the Tennessee Department of Education and the UT system, we really do support all of our higher ed providers equivalently, agnostically, We're in the UT system, but we have lots of partners who are not necessarily UT providers. So our scope is the whole state of Tennessee. The budget for the grant is up to $4 million, and our budget that we have proposed so far is as close as we can get. So we're going to try to propose for every dollar of that $4 million to be used over 4 years period of time. It would start July 1st of 2024. So they're going to make decisions pretty quickly, and the grant will kick off in the summer through June 30th of 2028. There are some required partnerships, and that's why you all are on this call today. We need to have employer partners named. We need to have a state apprenticeship agency named in the grant. We need at least one equity-focused community-based organization, which TQEE is going to fit that required partnership. And then there are many other optional partners. And of course, the more partnerships you can show as a part of a proposal for a statewide initiative, probably the stronger the grant application will be. All right, next slide.
Hey, Erin, before we move on, I just want to acknowledge we have a couple of partners from our state agencies here, because you referenced state agencies.
Great.
We have Leanne, you're here, aren't you, from Department of Labor, Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development? Leanne Blevins?
Yes,
Yes.
from the State Apprenticeship Agency. So, have I gotten you all the info on who you need to send the letter to? Y'all already know that, right?
I think we've
Your
got that.
request?
I think
Okay.
we've got that information, but I'm going to invite people, if you all would, just as we move through this, we're going to have some Q&A period at the end. And also, if everybody, as you're thinking, please feel free to go and put questions in the chat as they're coming up, and we'll try to attend to those. And also, for those of you who came on just a little bit late, we're putting our names and organizations in the chat so that we know everyone's here. But Leanne, thank you for being here. And there may be some questions for our Department of Labor here in a second. And then also, I think we have Department of Education represented on our call here today.
Great.
Deanna, looks like I'm seeing
Yes.
you, and Aaron.
Glad
Great.
to be here.
Thank you all for being
Wonderful.
here, and really appreciate the partnership that these state agencies are lending to this effort. Okay, on to our next slide then there. Aaron, back to you.
Absolutely. Yep, thanks. And thanks, everyone. So just to give a little framework and image for what we're going to talk about next, we can think about the learner at being at the center of what we're doing. And by learner, we mean folks who are working on becoming early childhood care providers, or upskilling from their current role. And what do they need in order to do that? Well, they need an employer, they need a sponsor, and they need a provider of related instruction. Those are kind of the three elements that are foundational to any apprenticeship program. And pre-apprenticeship feeds directly into those apprenticeship programs. And we'll talk about both of those a little bit more in a minute. But I'm just going to give you a brief description of employer, sponsor, and provider of related instruction. And you can start thinking about which one of those categories you might fall within with your organization, or you might be in all three, or you might be in two of the three. So be thinking about which category you would place yourself in, maybe all of them. So the employer is the person who is employing the learner, paying them a wage and supervising them and providing them with a mentor, some on-the-job training as they are in their apprenticeship program. Sometimes the employer is also the sponsor. And in many non-teaching apprenticeships, that is the case. In teacher apprenticeship, the Tennessee Grow Your Own Centers model with the Tennessee Department of Ed is that the Tennessee Department of Education serves as the sponsor for all registered teacher apprenticeships in the state. And what that means is that the Tennessee Department of Ed takes on a lot of the responsibility via the Grow Your Own Center. So we're kind of that operational technical assistance hub that operates in service of Tennessee Department of Ed. So they take on that responsibility of ensuring that the requirements of registered teacher apprenticeship are met, and that the learner does not incur cost as a part of their program, or very little cost at least. So in our case for registered teacher apprenticeships, TDOE is the sponsor, the school districts are the employers. And then we have a variety of providers of related instruction. In our scenario in teacher apprenticeship, these are colleges and universities. And our colleges and universities, there are 11 of them currently, and they are providing the last 2 years of a bachelor's degree or 1 year post-bac if someone already has a bachelor's degree from a different field and they're coming into the teaching profession kind of a second career. So every learner who's in an apprenticeship program has those 3 elements. Pre-apprenticeship is similar, but a little bit different. We might get into that a little bit later. Tennessee Grow Your Own Center's responsibilities in this particular apprenticeship grant project would be that we would manage the grant. We would provide technical assistance to anyone associated with the grant. So helping people get their programs registered. Maybe you run a program right now that has all of the elements of registered apprenticeship, but it's not registered. Registration will open up access to new sources of funding. We can provide technical assistance with that. We will provide program evaluation as a part of this grant to help tell that story of return on investment. So when X number of dollars are spent to prepare early childhood educators, here's the return on that investment in terms of, economic development, community impact, and impact for that individual specifically, impact for the children in those communities. So there's a significant portion of the grant funding allocated to do that program evaluation to assist with that effort. And then state agency alignment, part of what the Tennessee Grow Your Own Center does is tries to ensure that all this programmatic activity that's happening among employers, sponsors, and providers of related instruction is in coordination with and alignment with what Tennessee Department of Ed has as far as like licensure standards, for example, and what Department of Labor and Workforce Development expects in terms of registering apprentices and apprenticeship programs and tracking completion and ensuring strong results. So we look after a lot of those alignment efforts. TQEE on the other side of our framework, Blair has been instrumental in helping to coordinate partnerships with many of you. She's got these networks that many of you are a part of, and just being able to find the right people to connect with to make this kind of work possible is really, it's really valuable to have an organization like TQEE. You can be focused on that, identifying complementary resources that can help support this work, peer-to-peer support, identifying which peers can be supportive of whom, and state agency alignment as well, especially as it relates to our DHS colleagues, probably. Any questions about that kind of overall picture?
We've got a question in the chat from Beth Lackey, and I know she's going to have to jump off. I think her question we'll be able to address it right here as we get into this next section, but Beth is asking, will there be options for teachers who want to add on the pre-K licensure? There is not an easy option to add on this licensure. It isn't an option to take a praxis to add the certification. It usually requires additional coursework, which teachers must pay for on their own. So Erin, I don't know if you want to just try to take that now or hold it for a little bit.
Yeah, Beth, since I know you have to drop off, that is the intent of this grant, is that we would be able to provide funding to help 4 of our providers of related instruction to provide accessible coursework, accessible related instruction, so that those folks who want to add on that pre-K licensure will have access to it. Right now, there's literally like such limited access around the state for folks to be able to add on that licensure. So that is part of the work of the grant.
Yippee. Thank you. Thank you. I actually teach the coursework, so I have to recruit my own students, but
Good.
But thank you. I appreciate that, because we have to turn people away who desperately want to join us, but they don't have the licensure. And so thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Well, so this slide is just sort of considerations for the apprenticeship models as you all are designing them. Some of you all have apprenticeship models that you've already designed and have underway, and you're going to be adapting and establishing new ones. Some of you are just new to this and have just created a registered apprenticeship and are preparing to launch it. And some of you all are new and just considering whether that you would like to establish apprenticeships in your community. You have some partners who are interested and ready, but you are new to it. All of you all kind of fit the scope of this grant. So I just wanted you to know that. And these are some of the considerations that we'll be sort of entertaining along with you and hoping to be a resource partner for you on this. And we mentioned, again, childcare We are really seeking to support childcare entities, private childcare entities in developing early educators to staff their programs. And we are also, again, continuing to adapt the strategies in pre-K third to make sure we've really got emphasis on that, emphasis on those educators and that pipeline. The pre-apprenticeship that Erin mentioned, that is, she can get into a little bit about what a pre-apprenticeship is. But, for example, a CCTE program that is funded, a high school career and technical education program that is already funded, through state and local funds and dollars, that is preparing, for example, Germantown High School in Memphis, Tennessee, and the Memphis Shelby County Schools has a program that creates opportunities for high school students to not only complete coursework, but also dual enroll in their associate degree program in a community college and also complete their CDA by the end of that time. And that is could be considered a pre-apprenticeship program. Obviously, paid positions during the apprenticeship is crucial. And so in the VPK arena, you may have your teacher assistants that are already paid. Those will be a natural fit for apprenticeships. Also, student education assistants. Many of our LEAs employ student education assistants in the K-3 classrooms. And then in childcare centers and preschool programs, private preschool programs, you may have teacher assistant type of positions who could be, could serve to support apprentices. And then we're going to be talking and wanting to hear and learn about what are the credentials your partnerships are hoping to support your apprentices to achieve, and what are the competencies, the specific competencies a part of that. Training and instructional provider partners, who would those be? There in some cases, the employer can be the training partner. In other cases, we have our community colleges, our our bachelor degree granting institutions and other types of training instructional providers, wraparound supports. This is, we really bring kind of an equity lens to this work and are very intentional about wanting to deploy resources in our state to support children and their families who have experienced opportunity gaps and are economically or otherwise disadvantaged or at risk. And we wraparound supports we view as a very important part of that. And that would be a feature of this grant. And also we hope of any of the programs that you all are working on for apprenticeships. Financial supports and use of existing resources. We'll talk about what those are in a minute, but we're big at TQEE and we think our state has a lot of great resources that can support this work. And so we want to make sure that we are sharing and making our partners aware of what their resources are that can be used, that can then help our grant funds stretch further. And then sort of what your timeline to the credential. There obviously need to be salary increases. I say obvious, I shouldn't say that, but as Erin mentioned, the US Department of Labor through apprenticeship programs really expects that upon attainment of a credential and completion of an apprenticeship that there is a salary increase commensurate to that. That's an important part of the model. And then this cohort model notion, which is Erin mentioned a mentor being a kind of a crucial component of any apprenticeship to sort of do the teaching and the guidance. But there's also a lot of information out there that points to cohort models being very effective in supporting persistence for people who are pursuing post-secondary education and degrees that can be tough, can be hard. And we know that we have, particularly in our associate's degree programs and otherwise in Tennessee Promise programs, we have a lot of, dropout and stop out. So we are looking for, I know many of you all are championing efforts to establish cohort-based approaches that can provide special supports. Let's see, with that, Erin, any comments you would add on this slide before we move on to the next and the specifics about the grant?
I think you covered it well. I was responding to a couple of questions in chat just about
Perfect.
timeline, but I think we're going to get to that more when we talk about the grant on the next slide. So.
Perfect. Let's jump to it then. Here we go. Back over to you.
All right. Thanks so much. Unless did anyone else have a question for Blair about the last slide before we move on? Okay, great. Thanks, Connie, for being here. So going back to those categories we described earlier of employer, sponsor, provider of related instruction, again, considering your role, you might be eligible for more than one category of funding here, depending on what you provide to your apprentices. So we'll just start on the left here and kind of go left to right with categories of funding. So the first category of funding that we are applying for within the grant is funds for related instruction for apprentices. With estimates to enroll 100 apprentices in fall of 24, 150 in fall of 25, and 200 in fall of 26, for a total of 450 apprentices. And these could be in a wide variety of locations, both child care center and BPK, LEA types of settings. So very broad, trying to keep broad definitions here so we have room to designate to meet the most needs possible. So we've kind of designated $1,500 per learner for related instruction, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those $1,500 need to be used for each learner. It just needs to be used in the category of related instruction for the person the entity who's being awarded those funds. Many of our learners who are at that associate's degree level, for example, who are getting their associates, they're going to be eligible for Tennessee Promise, Tennessee Reconnect, Pell. There's a lot of funding sources already available for them, so they may not need the $1,500 per learner. So the employer who is being allocated those $1,500 per learner could use those funds that are designated for that learner differently, kind of stack them with funds for another learner and use them for someone who needs the last 2 years of their bachelor's degree funded, for example. So the $1,500 per learner is an allocation, has to be used for related instruction, but doesn't necessarily have to be used per individual learner. You would be using it for things like tuition, books, academic fees, testing, training, those sorts of things. The second category of funding is designated for employers. This is the largest category of funding for the whole grant. We anticipate awarding funds to 8 employers starting in fall of 2024, with an additional 8 to 15 employers starting in fall of 2025. We would allocate $3,750 per learner for the employers and the employers will tell us, I think I can accommodate 10 apprentices or 5 apprentices or 25 apprentices in my program in the upcoming year. And then the employer could use those funds for things like stipends for mentors, extra compensation for apprentices, or to, supplement the compensation that they're able to offer that apprentice. They can use it for background checks, wraparound services, tutoring. And then we'll work really closely. The center will work with you and with Leanne's group, with the Department of Labor Workforce Development, to identify opportunities to make use of funding sources like WIOA, which are federal dollars that can sometimes be used to help with things like transportation and childcare and emergency costs. And they'll work with us to understand eligibility criteria for particular learners who may be able to access those funds as well. But that's what the Tennessee Grow Your Own Center is here to do. We're here to help provide those connections and technical support to understand what other funding sources might be available to leverage for employers who find that what's being provided isn't enough to cover the needs for the learner, because we all just want the apprentices to be successful. So we're here to help you find resources for whatever is needed to help that apprentice succeed. Then we have 2 more smaller categories of funding. One is startup funding, some mini grants to register new apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship programs. So we have budgeted for about $2,500 per startup for folks who don't have a program registered right now and could really just use some startup funding to get that program registered and off the ground, up and running. Maybe some recruitment dollars, some advertising dollars, some money to get together and meet in person for those programs to get started. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, accessible pathways. We know that right now providing related instruction in all the locations of the state where it's needed is a bit of a challenge. And so we'll provide some funds for providers of related instruction to make their programs more accessible, especially in rural locations. So we will select 4 providers of related instruction and provide them with $50,000 each to commit to making their programs more accessible. Any questions about any of those categories?
Aaron, I'm just going to make a mention of, as people are thinking about questions or putting them in the chat. TECTA is and CCR&R, I want to call out those 2 partners. Those are really specific to the Department of Human Services. We were on a call with the Department of Human Services last week and also with TECTA, and they have particularly for educators or early educators who are looking to get their CDA, get a associate's degree, further their credential stacking. If they are employed with a Department of Human Services licensed facility, they have access to some significant resources through federal funding, the Child Care and Development Fund, and that TECTA, the Tennessee the Tennessee Early Childhood Training Alliance, has offices at all of our state community colleges, and they really do have a wealth of resources to pay for CDA exams and training, to pay for associate degree training programs, and to pay even some money towards bachelor degree, a good chunk of change towards bachelor degree attainment. And so just calling that out as a resource that particularly in the childcare sphere, but even in the case of CCTE programs, there are opportunities for accessing those dollars. And the CCR&R, again, that also is a DHS partner that provides a lot of different types of training and support and resources to childcare providers that can really help. They have the wages program, for example, which is wage supplements upon achievement of a credential. And again, that's for DHS licensed providers, but I just want to mention that because those are the types of resources we're going to be encouraging folks to be aware of and to figure out how to utilize in your programs.
Yeah, Michelle had asked a question in the chat, Blair, along those lines, just the braiding and blending of resources. As Blair and I and Kate have had conversation, it's become apparent that there are quite a few funds designated if we can provide folks with access and pathways to braid and blend those funds in ways that gives them assurance, gives employers especially assurance that there will be funds available for their apprentices. So, while we have this $1,500 per learner related instruction allocation, we do feel that there are a lot of opportunities to braid and blend other sources to get at full funding for each apprentice.
Yeah, and Aaron, just per Michelle's question in the chat, the UM Current Apprenticeship Program approved via the Tennessee GYO Center. A lot of our, as we think about what is the money for bachelor's degrees, what kind of resource? There's Hope Scholarship, but that doesn't so much always tap our Tennessee Promise and Tennessee Reconnect dollars, which tend to be a much more robust funding source for and accessible for more learners. You gave me an example earlier today, which I love, which is Austin Peay State University, which grants associate degrees and bachelor's degrees, as I understand it. And so they have struck up a partnership with Montgomery County, Clarksville Montgomery County School System, whereby the first 2 years of the degree are paid, are an associate degree, and therefore paid and payable through Tennessee Promise or Tennessee Reconnect for eligible participants, of which many people are. And then there are opportunities, again, to sort of see about finding additional resources for those next 2 years. But I think, that's that related instruction, that $1,500 per learner could go towards that. We know that's not fully covering it. So we'll again continue to try to find, what are those resources to get that paid for? That's, I think that's what.
Those last 2 years of the bachelor's degree are where we're doing a lot of stacking and blending. The Tennessee Grow Your Own Center, funded through the $5 million allocation in the governor's budget through the Tennessee Department of Ed. That allocation is specifically for Grow Your Own Teacher Apprenticeship. Those funds right now, we anticipate allocating the majority of those to the last 2 years of bachelor's degrees or to a one-year program post-bac if someone happens to already have a bachelor's degree in something else. But that's another potential funding source for these folks as well.
Awesome. All right, what's our next slide here? Okay, this was a next step slide. And this is really just our thought is that we have a little worksheet that we'll send out after this that is meant to be a vehicle for you all to provide information back to Aaron and team for their grant writer, and to be sure that we're sort of incorporating the potential partnerships that would be a part of this grant. And it's not a commitment in any way. It doesn't commit you to doing anything, but it allows us to say, here are some of the partners that we anticipate being able to support through these grant funds. And here's a flavor for how that might look and how we might begin to get to those 450 paid apprenticeships over the 3 years. And so we'll send out a worksheet on that. And then we're asking for a member of your team or members of your team to sign up for a 30-minute proposal discussion on either Monday or Tuesday, April 1st or 2nd. We'll send out a doodle poll or a sign up situation so y'all can pick a slot, and you can ask questions and we can talk in a more nuanced way about your particular circumstances and the kind of program you're envisioning or would like to have considered be a part of this grant opportunity. And with that, Aaron, do you want to just comment a minute just on what I said, how you're constructing the grant application so that it doesn't require everybody to commit to anything? You want to just talk about that?
Sure. So in the slide where I showed the categories of funding, really what we're committing to in the grant proposals, we're saying we will provide opportunity for 450 apprentices in early childhood education. We will start 20 new registered apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship programs. So those kind of large numbers in the buckets, we will make accessible 4 new pathways into early childhood education. That's what we're going to really designate in the proposal, the how of getting there. So we're going to commit to at least 8 employer partnerships around the state, but the very specific details for how many apprentices per employer, we're not going to go into that much detail in the grant because we want to provide some space to work through these proposals with you all and look at equitability and diversity as well as we try to allocate things in an equitable way.
Great. Yes, and there's questions being asked about, will we send out the worksheet? Yes, after this session, we'll send out by email to all of you who participated, and you can forward on to your colleagues the recording of this session, the worksheet, and then we'll also send up a link to a sign up where you can sign up for an individual session where Aaron and Kate and I will be present to talk with you about your proposal. Let's see, anything else? Anybody else got any other questions?
Yes, I have a quick question. You may have mentioned it. How long would it take for the apprentice to complete the program?
Kind of depends on which step of that lattice they're trying to step from and into. In general, a year for many of those programs, but not all. Blair,
Okay.
you can provide more detail.
Yeah, and Tisha, hey Tisha.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Awesome, thanks for joining. Well, hey, yeah, I think, it really depends. Like if we're thinking about Memphis Shelby County Schools and, Divalin's, pre-K TAs, for example, if we're thinking about those TAs moving towards getting a CDA, if they don't have that, well, that's a very short-term, quick turnaround, kind of a partnership in a way to, you could probably get that accomplished within 6 months potentially. depending on how you structure it. But if it's a bachelor degree, you know, a bachelor degree program that you're offering for some of them, and some of them may want to participate in the bachelor degree, I think that's obviously a longer term prospect
Okay.
for many of them. And so that would be more of a 3-year, you know, depending on if the, you know, if the partner's U of M, or, you know, if some college decides to make online study available, there may be a partnership opportunity, you know, to expedite something kind of through summers or evenings and weekends, those kind of things. So it's a little bit depending on the instructional partner and the degree, you know, or the credential that is being sought.
Okay, and just to add, just for clarification, in one of my other questions, so we would actually apply for the apprenticeship and not the EPP?
I think in this case, you all would be the employer. And
Okay.
so I think Aaron would, you know, I think ideally the
It's gonna-
employer, yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
It's going to depend a little bit on the nature of the, like, is it a VPK or is it a childcare center? You know, I don't know your situation as well as Blair does, so she can probably speak to it more accurately, but,
Okay,
Yeah, Tisha is with the Memphis Shelby County School System.
Okay.
And I should be saying Dr. Hobson is part of the Memphis Shelby County School System and is representing, Dr. Hobson, what do you do human resource, right? And
I
workforce
am in
pipeline
human
development.
resources, and Dr. Gordon, she's actually our director over pre-K. So I was just kind of trying to ask those questions so we
Yeah.
can know
Yeah.
who we're partnering with.
Yeah,
We're actually partnering with the University of Memphis. And so I was trying to make sure that, because I think Dr.
Right.
Armstrong, she's representing, but Dr. Anderson is not on. So we gonna
Yeah.
know who the correct entity should apply for the workshop or
That's
complete the worksheet.
yeah, it would be you all, it would be the Memphis Shelby County School System as the employer, and it might be, yeah, it might
But
be Dablin.
we may be calling you guys for some assistance. So we'll
Yeah.
definitely be on the April Tuesday. Is it April
Good.
1 and 2?
Yeah, we'll send you a sign up so you can pick
Okay, perfect.
pick a slot that works for you and whomever else you want to bring. But that's great. That's exactly how it would work. And we'll sort of talk through that. But I know that you all are thinking about multiple on-ramps. One of them being the CCTE program, being maybe a pre-apprenticeship, where she could actually recruit, she meaning Dablin could actually recruit people to be TAs, those graduates to be teacher assistants in her VPK program, and then they could get enrolled in a bachelor degree apprenticeship program with
Yeah.
U of M potentially. Should
yeah,
they?
you could have multiple providers of related instruction within those overlapping circles that we showed within that framework. You know, you could have, for learners who have this on-ramp, here's their provider of related instruction. For learners who need this on-ramp, here's their provider. It could be University of Memphis, could be local community college, could be, you know, other providers you've identified.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you, Aaron and Blair.
absolutely. Let's see, anybody else got any Beth Huber, what are qualifications of the mentor teacher for childcare centers? Ah, good question.
I wasn't sure on that one, Blair. So.
I don't know the answer to that either. One of the things that we are, Beth and others of you who are particularly looking at childcare center participating in this, Department of Human Services and TECTA are at the very early stages of a apprenticeship program for childcare where they're piloting it and they are doing some design. And we want to make sure, Aaron and I met with them last week and are going to be meeting again next week. I want to make sure that we are learning from and making sure that we and the childcare centers that are participating as part of this grant opportunity are able to learn from and reflect on what's being designed there. It doesn't mean that your models have to mirror that, but you know, we want some alignment around some of the competencies of the apprentices. So that would speak to then what we're looking for in the mentors in terms of their credentials and experience. So I think we'll have probably maybe some more information on that for you when we connect on next Monday or Tuesday.
Thank you. My brain might have jumped forward a few steps when I was thinking about that, but
I love it.
I was just curious as to how that would work.
That was a great question.
It's a great question, because if you're trying to think about how many apprentices you can accommodate, one of the first questions you want to ask yourself is how many mentors do I have available to mentor those apprentices? So it's great.
Any other questions from anybody?
Blair, it's Rosa.
Hey, Rosa.
And hey, this may be more for Aaron, but as I'm working through my brain and we represent the 14 counties and trying to provide the partner proposal, when we go out and discuss, we've got 3 or 4 that would really meet the criteria of this. It would be really great. But narrowing down who the best fit is at the table, what are some things you're looking at of saying, no, that's the one you need to have a discussion with, and that's going to make the biggest impact?
Well, I don't know, Aaron, I know you've got thoughts that we want to have 8 for this year and then add on another 8 or 15. And it might, so the question, Rosa, might be, kind of who seems most ready, at this time to be at a point to be able to say, yeah, I'm in. I can't say exactly how it's all going to work, but or exactly how many apprentices, but we're in and we want to commit, and here's our employer, and here's our, sponsor, and here's our instructional provider that we'd be partnering with.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, Rosa. If you don't want to leave anyone out, if you're worried about like, how do I make that choice right now? I don't want to leave anyone out.
Yeah.
You could always designate for fall of 24. These would be the folks who are most ready, just given the pieces of the framework that they already have in place. And then there's more opportunity later, for fall of 25 and fall of 25 to add more partners then.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, enrollment window for fall of 24 is going to be super tight. So for those 100 apprentices who we would love to see enroll for fall, it needs to be folks who kind of already have a structure in place. They're already doing this or doing something similar to this, and we're just kind of there to accelerate and expand.
All right, anybody else got any questions for now? Well, good. Well, I do just want to reiterate, and I will reiterate in the email, we are 2 things. One is, this is a grant application. It's competitive grant. The Tennessee Grow Your Own Center will be the applicant, and we think we've got a really good story to tell and a really good pitch, but there are a lot of people across the nation that are going to be applying for this. So very competitive, and we may or may not get the grant. We hope we will. But the second thing I'll say is that I'm really excited about, and sometimes grant opportunities help accelerate, partnerships and conversations and movement. And so even where we not awarded the grant, I think, it's our commitment at TQEE, and I know it's the Grow Your Own Center's commitment to continue to work towards supporting these kinds of apprenticeship models for the early childhood space and early educators. And so I feel very excited about that, and think it's kind of the beginning of a new era in our work in building the early educator pipeline across Tennessee. And I'm excited. To find ways to support all of you all who are doing this great work on the ground.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Okay, with that, I think if there's no other questions, and I don't see any others in the chat, Aaron, any closing thoughts? Anything you'd like to say?
Thankful to get to know you all a little bit. Like Blair said, if we don't end up getting the grant, I hope we can continue to connect and find ways to serve Tennesseans and children across the state really, really well. Appreciative of all of your efforts, all the work you all do on a regular basis to serve learners and children.
This was a great meeting. Thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.